Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some upset alerts around the country this upcoming weekend, and we did talk about that River rivalry. And Anthony, yes, it doesn't make any sense. It's always going to be very close, regardless of how good each team looks on paper. It's going to be a hard fought game. Pretty much it comes down to who wants it more, and it's a very unique game for that respect. And Miami, Florida State, kind of the exact same. So it's going to be an absolute battle, and frankly, whoever wants it more is likely winning that game. But let's get into a little bit of a whip around and talk about all the different games we haven't had a chance to get to, with a lot of the attention going up top. No two ways about that. But Coastal Carolina at JMU is a really interesting one to me, because you have two teams that are still very much looking at the Sun Belt title as a real possibility. Coastal Carolina started a conference play with a win over Old Dominion, while JMU took a really tough loss to ULM. So it's going to be interesting to see how they move forward from here. I think JMU needs this win just very badly and needs to get back on track offensively. Good news is the Coastal Carolina defense can very much be attacked. One of the worst defenses in the country, giving up more than 200 yards on both respects, and passing and rushing per game. JMU should be able to do a ton through the air in this one. And then Ethan Vasic Vasco has played really, really good football for Coastal Carolina, stepping in for Grayson McCall after he left for NC State. 7 touchdowns, 2 picks, over 1,100 yards this year. He's been answering a lot of questions. No two ways about that. And they're a very, very solid team offensively. That being said, I do think there's a little bit of a shootout. I think it goes back and forth. Coastal Carolina is going to run the ball a little bit more effectively or a little bit more aggressively than JMU is. But I think it's going to be really fun to watch tonight. But I think JMU gets the win. So definitely going to want to tune in for that one, because JMU is a team that, frankly, whenever they're on TV, is definitely worth your time to watch. But then we'll get to UNLV, Utah State, and frankly, I just love this UNLV team. Whenever they're on TV, I want to talk about this game because this offense is so much fun to watch. Haj Malik Williams was really good last week. He didn't necessarily have a down week by any means. He just ran into a team that was going to score pretty much every time they touched the ball with Kyle McCord and Syracuse. So I think this UNLV team, I talked about it when I broke down that game, it doesn't change who they are to me. It doesn't change their ability to make the playoff in any way, if I'm being honest. If they win out the rest of the way, I'm having a hard time not putting them in. They would have beat Boise State. They would have beaten San Jose State. So you have to feel pretty good about this team going forward. And when you have that offense against, frankly, one of the worst defenses in the entire country in Utah State, it's going to be a nightmare for them to deal with. I'll be totally honest with you. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. Do I have the conferences wrong there, Ant? I very well could. I don't think I do. I believe they're both Sun Belt. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll double check that and get back to you tomorrow. But I do believe they're both Sun Belt teams right now. But UNLV is going to be able to attack this defense. There's no two ways about that. They are a very, very good offense, and even in the loss, they were able to score a ton of points against a Syracuse defense that, hypothetically, at least from a personnel perspective, should be able to stop UNLV. But whenever UNLV gets on the field, it's tons of fun to watch, and I think there's going to be no different. So whenever they get on the field, I'm probably going to talk about them, and I'm probably going to put them on a little bit of a pedestal, because when you talk about the G5, you're not going to talk about a lot of teams before you get to UNLV. And then we got an interesting one happening up there in Chapel Hill this upcoming weekend. Georgia Tech favored by 5 points heading up to North Carolina. This is one of those games where Georgia Tech's kind of starting to move in the right direction, make some noise in the ACC, but it could get ugly in a hurry. The Georgia Tech's one of those teams that plays really good football for a couple of weeks and then loses a game that they shouldn't lose. And I don't know if this is a game that they shouldn't lose, quote unquote, but it is a game where they're favored in. It is a game where you have another team that's reeling as badly as pretty much any team in the country right now. So you hypothetically should be able to win. Now, UNC without a Marion Hampton is just not a great football team and definitely not a great offense. Now, taking him out of the game is an absolute nightmare to do. He is so good. He can find pretty much any opening that you need to. And frankly, I think he's one of those guys that can do anything on the football field. And Georgia Tech's not the elite defense that they very much need to be. Now, they did pretty good against the run last week, but the reality is they're going to have to play a much better brand of football up front and possibly be able to slow down this run if they're going to make any type of noise in this game. Now, Georgia Tech with a Haynes King running the football and not turning it over is as dangerous as it possibly gets. This offense runs very, very efficiently, and the really only way they get stopped on a consistent basis is Haynes King makes the mistakes, but he hasn't been the last couple of weekends, so maybe they can keep it going. I do think it's a relatively close game, but I think Georgia Tech ends up getting the win in this one. But yeah, I think, Anthony, the one big-time weakness I'm worried about for UNLV is just the defense is not all that consistent. Now, there's a number of places that they can play a lot better, but the reality is when they face those elite teams, when they face Boise State in a couple of weeks, do they have the answers that they need to have? Because that's probably the game that's going to decide who from the Mountain West is in that CFP conversation. So I do have a little bit of worry about that defense. I think they're going to be more than fine on Friday night against Utah State, but I think when they face a Boise State team, maybe that's exposed just a little bit more the same way it was against Syracuse. But I think the other thing you asked about, the North Carolina quarterback, there's a number of different things happening up there. You had Max Johnson go down early in the year and definitely changed up a lot of things. Connor Harrell, I believe, is the starter right now, but they're kind of playing around with Jacoby Criswell as well. That quarterback position is a real nightmare, if I'm being totally honest, up there at UNC. So it's kind of hard to keep track of everything. Maybe it's one of those things that kind of takes shape after the year, but as of right now, they're facing with a little bit of a nightmare at that quarterback position. No two ways about that. And then you got Washington at Iowa. This is a huge game for Washington. They have every chance to possibly get back in the fight in the Big Ten if they can win this one. Now, it's going to be really tough to do that. Washington was really able to attack the back end of the Michigan defense last week. It's not going to be quite as easy to do that against Iowa. They have dudes all over the field, and frankly, it took Ohio State a while to really get going through the air. And then you had Jeremiah Smith make ridiculous plays, and then everything kind of came together. But I don't think Iowa's going to be quite as susceptible as Michigan was on that back end. So maybe Washington has to change the approach a little bit. Maybe they have to use Jonah Coleman a little bit more aggressively in this game and then attack the back end when you have the openings. But it's going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold. These Ohio State wide receivers are obviously a lot more to deal with than the Washington wide receivers, but maybe it's going to be one of those things where Iowa's totally able to shut down the run and Washington doesn't have a lot of answers. And then on the other side, Iowa's going to run the football, and Michigan ran the football okay last week, didn't run it to the extent that they needed to, obviously, and Washington has really, really good defensive linemen, has a really good linebacking core. Maybe they can slow down Caleb Johnson. Now, you'd have to slow him down 2 weeks in a row, and that is not easy by any means. So it's going to be really interesting. I do like Iowa in a really ugly one here, but at the end of the day, in the Big Ten, anything could happen, and one big play could totally change this game for sure. But Iowa State, West Virginia, this is the game that we probably could have talked about in the Big 12 slate, and definitely a big-time game in the Big 12 this upcoming weekend. I just think Iowa State's going to roll. I'll be totally honest with you guys. I don't think the line of 3 is good. I might just take it tomorrow, but I'll get to that later. But West Virginia is a team that's playing really good football right now. They're also doing it by just running the football. That's the way they go about business, and if they can't do that in this game, I don't know if they have a counterpunch, and I think Iowa State's going to be able to stop them. They did a really good job against Caleb Johnson in the back end of that Iowa game, and I think they're going to be able to do the same thing in this one. Now, West Virginia is going to be able to put up a fight in this one. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a 40-point blowout or anything too crazy, but at the end of the day, I think Iowa State just has more answers. I think they have more dudes on the offensive side of the ball, and I think when you look at West Virginia, they're playing really good football. They haven't necessarily played a team remotely near Iowa State's level, and I think Iowa State's going to be able to stop that run game. So I could have broken it down. I could have gotten into details, but frankly, I think Iowa State's winning by about 2 scores in this one, and I'm more than happy to take my beating if I don't get that right. But at the end of the day, they definitely are. I very much think they are one-dimensional, Anthony. I think you take away that run game, you take away Jaheim White, you take away C.J. Donaldson, it's a nightmare of a day for that offense because while I really like Garrett Green, the one attribute he does have that is really incredible is his running ability, is his ability to go through contact, and if you put him on the ground, then maybe it's a little bit longer of a day for that West Virginia offense. So I would say they're one-dimensional, and I think Iowa State has every ability to take away that dimension, frankly. And then you got Cal at Pitt. This is a huge game for Cal, and frankly, coming off a game where they probably feel like they should have won. And then you got a Pitt team on the other side that's one of the 12 remaining undefeateds in college football. They are number 22 in the country. I forgot to put that in there. Apologies. But at the end of the day, Eli Holstein's playing about as good a football as really anyone in the country. The spotlight is growing on Pitt, so these games become a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more intense every single week, and the biggest question here is, what is Cal's headspace heading into this game? Do they feel good about where they are right now? Do they feel like they got cheated and they're not going to bring 100%, or did they feel like they got cheated and they're going to come out with their hair on fire? So it's going to be really interesting to watch that one, and then obviously you have to think about travel. It's a very, very big factor in the ACC this year, and maybe they start a little bit slow, and frankly, they can't in this game. They absolutely cannot start slow against the Pitt offense because they're really going to get going. I tend to believe Pitt's going to win, but I don't know. It's an absolute toss-up. Now, Anthony very much likes Cal, so it's one of those things that it very much can be a total toss-up, and this Pitt offense has been running very effectively. Maybe Cal can cause some issues the same way they did against Miami, and Pitt doesn't have the firepower to come back the same way Miami does. So it'll be interesting. I think the biggest thing here is just what's Cal's headspace heading into this game. And then we got an interesting game over in the ACC that you probably didn't circle in your preseason, to be totally fair, but the reality is Virginia is one of the undefeated teams in the conference right about now. Now, not undefeated overall, but undefeated in the conference. They're playing really, really good football, and I think they can attack this back end of the schedule. Now, it's going to be a nightmare. It's a very, very tough schedule when they have in the back end, but you beat a Louisville team and you get a little bit of momentum rolling down the hill, maybe you can be a more dangerous team than people have you pegged to be. But at the end of the day, Louisville very badly needs to get this defense under control. It is not nearly where you expected it to be, even on the defensive front that has a lot of really good players. They're not playing the elite football that they should be playing. So it's going to be an interesting test, definitely one of those that they're going to have to put together a really good performance in. I think Louisville just badly needs this win. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win fairly comfortably, and Virginia just hasn't had a big-time tested quarterback. Maryland posed a little bit with Brian Edwards and with MJ Morris, but at the end of the day, I do think Louisville just has more in the tank than those two teams have, and I think Virginia loses in this one. Then we got Memphis, South Florida, and this is a huge game in the group of five. Memphis is favored in this one, and this is two teams that just missed the mark a little bit this year. Obviously, Memphis taking that loss to Navy was absolutely huge for them, and then South Florida took the two losses early to Alabama and Miami, and then got beat by Tulane really, really bad. So they're probably out of the fight. I think Memphis is still relatively in the fight. They're a little bit up and down on offense and need to find that groove with Seth Hannigan under center. But the reality is, a very dangerous team, a lot of really good playmakers on that offense. And then, will Byron Brown go in this game is a big-time question. And when will this game happen is another big-time question. They were supposed to play on Friday. They got pushed back to Saturday because of the hurricane. Also, just a quick shout-out, if you do have the ability to donate to the people down there in Florida, please do. It's definitely something that a lot of us can't even fathom. So a huge, huge thing happening out down there, and anyone that can help in any way, definitely do that. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a really interesting game whenever it does happen, and we'll have plenty to do with what the American is. Obviously, we'll keep you updated on all the updates there, but at the end of the day, it will be a very, very fun game whenever it is played. It's going to be an incredible week. Absolutely awesome. And we're officially done with the picks for this week. We will be back tomorrow to tie up all the loose ends and everything like that, and break down the future of the sport, which took a lot of different turns this week. But we'll break it all down on tomorrow's show. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.